podcast where the world is seen through the eyes of teenagers. I'm your host, Weston Johnson, and joining me today are my amazing co hosts.
Lena.
And June.
And in this show, we're going to be deep diving into issues that matter most to us, things we see, feel, and experience in our day to day lives, whether it's social media, politics, climate change, or everything in between. It's time for us to speak up, share our perspectives, and talk about how our world is shaping, or, oh my goodness, how the world is shaping our generation.
Whether it's the challenges we're facing or the dreams we're chasing, we're here to give you an honest, unfiltered look at what it's like to be a teen in today's world.
So grab your headphones and tune in. Let's start the conversation because the world isn't just for adults, it's ours too. And today we're going to be sharing how we see it through our eyes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion. We're going to be talking about the Electoral collage and how it works, what it is, how it works, and importantly, what's wrong with it. The Electoral college is like a system we use to elect the president and vice president in the U.S. It's every 4 years, Americans cast their votes for president. But instead of directly voting for the U.S. candidate, they vote for the electors, people who cast the official vote for the president on their behalf. The number of electors each state is equal to the number of senators and representatives in Congress.
Yeah, but at first glance, it sounds pretty straightforward. But when you break it down, things start to get a little weird. The most obvious issues that the Electoral College can often does result in a candidate winning the presidency without winning the popular vote, which is in my opinion, doesn't make sense, but it's okay. Also, that happened with Trump and Hillary Clinton in 2016, where Clinton won. Oh, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but she won the popular vote by over nearly 3 million. But Trump got the Electoral College vote, so he became president in 2016.
Yeah, that's the heart of the problem. The system is supposed to represent the will of the people, but it doesn't always do that. The Electoral College distorts the outcome of the election by giving disproportionate weight to smaller states. For instance, Wyoming has a much smaller population than California, but both states get 2 senators. So in terms of electoral votes, a single vote in Wyoming has way more influence than a single voter in California. This creates a system where candidates tend to focus more on swing states like Florida, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, while ignoring larger, more reliably Democratic or Republican states where they might not have as much of a chance as flipping the vote.
Yeah, and speaking of swing states, let's talk about how that affects the way the candidates campaign. It's a real issue when candidates spend most of their time and resources it's in just a bunch of battleground states. Voters in place in Ohio, Wisconsin, and Arizona get a lot of attention, while people in the places like New York or Texas, who live in states where one party is almost guaranteed to win, or one is most likely or guaranteed to get ignored. So it kind of reduces the meaning of a vote. If you live in California, for example, your vote feels less significant. A lot of less people vote in California because it doesn't really matter. In a general election, in a general election, that state is pretty solidly Democratic. But on the flip side, if you live in Texas, your vote might feel less significant if you're a Democrat in that state. That's overwhelmingly Republican.
Exactly, and that makes it worse when the Electoral College leads to winner takes all outtakes. It's most states. Most states, except for Nebraska and Maine, have a system where whoever wins the majority vote wins in that state, takes all, and the electoral vote. So even if the candidate wins by a slim amount of votes, they get all the power of that state. And that just overrides people's vote, what they want, and that means millions of voters in states aren't aren't close in the electoral, like California or New York. Doesn't matter how much in terms or deciding the outcome.
Right, it's like an all or nothing system that can skew the results. Some argue the Electoral College was originally created to balance the influence of smaller states, but in modern time it just doesn't serve the same purpose anymore. It's 2024 and states like California and Texas have huge populations. There's no reason for those states to be treated as if they were the same as Wyoming or Vermont. But there's the thing, the Electoral College is hard to get rid of. Changing it would require a constitutional amendment, and that's not so easy. Plus, some people still want to defend it, saying it protects the interests of smaller states or that it encourages. I can't understand that word.
That's a good point.
Coalition.
What?
The word's coalition.
Yeah, we wrote out a script and I put in a few weird words for June. My bad. Yeah, that's a really good point. Some people argue that the Electoral College is meant to preserve the voices of smaller states so that candidates need to appeal a broader, bigger range of voters and not just urban centers. They say it forces candidates to reach out to different parts of the system. Oh, different parts of the country, I meant. And build more national appearance. But as we've discussed, it's hard to ignore that the system also tends to magnify the power of certain states while diminishing the power of others. And there's also an argument about federalism, this idea that states could have a certain amount of independence and autonomy. Proponents argue that the Electoral College is one way of ensuring that states play a role in the election process and that they aren't completely overridden by the will of majority in densely populated areas.
That's true, but we also have to remember that the goal of the democracy is to reflect the will of the people. Oh, the goal. Sorry. As accurately as possible. And the Electoral College doesn't always do that. It gives too much weight to a few swing states and causes a candidate to win the presidency without gaining the most votes overall. That sometimes we should be concerned about if we want to that's something we should be concerned about if we want to ensure that everyone votes counts equally.
And on top of that, there's the fact that the system can lead to bizarre outcomes like faithless electors. These are electors who, for whatever reason, decide not to vote for the candidate they pledged to support. In 2016, there were 10 faithless electors who went against their state's popular vote, and that's just one example. This undermines the idea that electors should be representative of the people's choice.
Well, my biggest question is, what's the solution? Should we get rid of the Electoral College entirely, or what? Should we get rid of the Electoral College entirely and just go with the national popular vote? Or are there other reforms that could fix the system without scrapping it all together?
I think the simplest solution would be switch to the national popular vote. If you're really committed to a system where every vote counts equally, that's the most straightforward way to do it. But we also mentioned earlier, it's tough to change the Constitution because the electoral is just such a big part of that.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said. I really don't have much to add on.
I think that's a really good point. No matter what we decide, we have to keep in mind that the goal is to have a system that's fair, transparent, and representative of all voters, not just ones in a few key battleground states. It's a tough issue, but it's definitely worth discussing. Thanks for both of you for sharing your thoughts today.
Thank you. It's always good to have these electoral college conversations or conversations in general.
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully we'll see some changes to make the system more fair in the future.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next time on Through Their Eyes.